Today we're joined in the studio by Professor Joshua Mckeown. He is the director of Oswego's Office of International Education and Programs. Dr. McKeown, thank you so much for joining us today over Zoom.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, we wish we could have you here in person, but we're happy to make it work however we can. I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about tariffs. There have been some new policies getting put in place by the Trump administration on some some foreign countries as a way to combat the fentanyl crisis. What are some of the reactions that we're seeing from other countries about this?
Uh, yeah, it's been really interesting the first month. So we're either seeing policies put in place or the threats to put policies in place to implement tariffs, and some as high as 25%. So these would be, taxes on imports from those countries. In some cases, like I noticed this week, a threat of a tariff against Mexico regarding the fentanyl drug problem. All the news today, for example, Mexico released, I think it was 29 convicted criminals into U.S. custody pretty quickly after that announcement was made. So, arguably the tariffs are being used for purposes other than economic reasons, which is really the purpose of a tariff in the first place. But anyway, that's what the president's doing. We're seeing some countries react pretty quickly.
Yeah, we are seeing some very quick and rapid reactions. Some of those reactions have been included from countries like Canada and China that feel that these tariffs are completely unnecessary and they intend to sort of retaliate if they are enforced. What do you think some of that retaliation could look like?
Well, traditionally, a tariff, which is a trade protection, um, ends up with the other country doing the exact same thing. That's why these sometimes are called trade wars. So if you put a 10% tariff on Canadian aluminum, they might put a 10% tariff on an American product. So usually it's sort of that back and forth um, escalation. In this case, it's a little. I would argue it's a little different because the goals of the U.S. with these tariffs are not always economic. In the case of Canada, again, a very close ally and friend, um, the Trump administration threatened to use tariffs over border security. And so recently, just in the past days and weeks, we've seen the increased Canadian armed forces presence on the border, photographs of Canadian military aircraft flying over the border. So that's a reaction. Whether that's actually a policy or just maybe the show of a policy, we'll see. But they are reacting pretty quickly to try to avoid these.
Yeah, thank you. We are running a little low on time, but I just wanted to get one last question in if possible. Um, how would this affect some of the domestic businesses and consumers in America if these sort of retaliations are put in
Yeah,
place?
yeah, and that's the worry, right? So if a 10% or a 25% tariff is put on imported goods, in all likelihood, it's the American consumer when they go to the store who will pay a higher price. It, it may not be the case. Maybe the retailers, maybe the companies importing it will absorb that, but probably it's likely they'll pass that cost on to the American consumers, which could harm inflation.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. McKeown. I hope to speak with you again sometime.